Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. On your screen there is Tendai Biti, a very, very familiar face to many Zimbabweans and non-Zimbabweans alike. In this video clip, he is talking about his favorite subject, finance. Tendai Biti was the Minister of Finance during the 2008 to 2013 Government of National Unity. He is proud of his contribution as Minister of Finance, and rightly so too. During the GNU, Zimbabwe's economy did show signs of recovery. There can be no denying it. In the financial year 2009 to 2010, the economy grew by a staggering 12%. The year before, it had shrunk by minus 6%. So there's no doubt that the GNU was a positive thing. But here he is talking about the economy, the finance, since the GNU. In this particular clip, he's talking specifically about the SIG.
You introduce a currency, Baba, on the 5th of April 2024. And you lie to the whole world that this currency is gold-backed. You even open up the vaults of the Reserve Bank and we see shiny bars of the yellow metal. But by 28th of September, you've got the indecency, kusanyara kwacho, the indecency of saying we have devalued the ZIG. But how do you devalue something that is backed by gold, Baba? It doesn't make sense. Makadhakwa here, murukuputa banje here, mutoriro here, iguka here, ibrongo here, inyaope here, chibuke here, inyati here. What are you smoking? So we've got over 40 billion metric tons of iron ore. We've got 63 minerals, Baba. Botswana down the road has got 1 mineral. But it was got US $10 billion reserves. My bank account, Baba, is at $300. Check.
Well, we can go on that
Chinese,
issue.
they are raping our country.
On that issue, but I don't want to go down that line. What I want people to remember here is that soon after the end of the GNU, Zimbabwe reverted to what it was before the GNU, i.e. gross mismanagement, corruption, etc., etc. One has got to ask what went wrong. And the truth of the matter is, as much as MDC leaders did a good job in helping revive the economy, the number one task of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging elections. As long as Zanu PF is able to rig the elections, the nation will be stuck with this corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical regime. The GNU was the golden opportunity to do so. When Zanu PF rigged the 2008 elections, SADC, credit where credit is due, and the AU refused to endorse Zanu PF as the winner, and thus forcing the regime to go into the GNU. It wasn't to revive the economy, although the economy in 2008, everyone would tell you, was in serious trouble. SADC did not deny Zanu PF legitimacy in 2008 because the Zimbabwe dollar had lost its value or there were nothing in the shops. They denied them legitimacy because in the March election, Zanu PF had blatantly cheated in the recount. Morgan Changirai, 73% win of the votes, were whittled down to 47%, just enough to force the runoff. And during the runoff, Zanu PF used wanton violence to force people to vote for Mugabe. SADC and the AU refused to accept Mugabe as the winner, and hence forced the GNU. The number one purpose of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms to stop the cheating of the March 2008 and the wanton violence during the runoff, so that elections would be free, fair, and credible. MDC guys failed to implement even one reform. This is why the first elections after the GNU in 2013, Zanu PF once again blatantly rigged those elections, and they were back in power. And they've been back in power ever since. So as much as Tendai Biti is right on the finance, people have got to ask him, why did MDC guys fail to implement even one token reform during the GNU when they had the golden opportunity to do so? What were they smoking? For 5 years, you failed to implement even one token reform. Putachi banje reads Mtoriro. The fact of the matter is, they failed to implement even one reform. And hence, Zanu PF was able to rig the 2013 election and was back in power. It is interesting to note at this point that Tendai Biti himself, in 2015, acknowledged that participating in the 2013 elections without first putting the reforms in place was a big mistake. It was a big mistake. And in this quotation, in an interview he gave in 2015, he's acknowledging that very fact. You can't keep on participating in flawed election that serves to give big benefits to dictators such as Robert Mugabe, he said. And he was right. This is what SADC actually had told them in 2013. Do not go into these 2013 elections without reforms, because Zanu PF is going to rig. Tendai Biti and company did not listen. They went ahead in those elections. In 2014, Tendai Biti was still with MDC-T, led by Morgan Tsvangirai. The party made a resolution that they would not participate in future elections without reforms. No reform, no elections was the rallying call. And it is that rallying call that Tendai Biti is reiterating in this quotation. But guess what? Tendai Biti and the rest of his friends in the MDC participated in the 2018 elections. What happened? What were they smoking? Muri kuputa chii kuvarume, muri kuputa chii mbanje here idzi. Madzoka kumbanje the GNU. The fact of the matter is they did participate. And not only in 2018, they've been participating in subsequent elections ever since. The explanation why they've been participating in these flawed elections, other than the issue of Mbanje, is given by David Coulthard, who in his book has admitted, he too admits that the election process is flawed. So flawed, it didn't make any sense to keep participating. But he also goes one step further than Tendai Biti and explain why he and his MDCN friends continued to participate. They could not trust their counterparts in MDC-T to boycott the elections. So they all ended up participating because they were all after the few gravy train seats they knew Zanu PF was giving away. They could not resist that. They may have been smoking Mbanje or whatever. But we also know the other reason why they continued participating in flawed elections is greed. The same greed that stopped them implementing even one token democratic reform during the GNU. That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. We have people who keep making the same mistake over and over again out of greed. As much as the people of Zimbabwe wants to see Zimbabwe change, the truth of the matter is, as long as Zimbabwe remains a pariah state, there will be no meaningful political or economic change in Zimbabwe. We'll be blundering from pillar to post. The only hope of Zimbabwe changing for the better is if we implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. If you can hold those in power to account, you have a chance of making sure that they focus on public good rather than their selfish ends. At the present moment, we've got a political system that is settled, where Zanu PF has retained its carte blanche powers to rig elections, and MDC and MDC/CCC have learned that if they abandon reforms, they can always tell their followers that they're going to win elections because they've got stringent strategies of winning rigged elections. People are foolish enough to believe it, and so the system is now settled to the position where Zanu PF rigs the elections to stay in power, and CCC participate in the flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy in return for a few gravy-trained seats. If we want to break the mold, we've got to accept that MDC-CCC no longer fight in the people's corner. Somebody has said MDC-CCC as Zanu PF Team B, playing for Team A to win and for Team A to have legitimacy. That is the truth. And until the people of Zimbabwe wake up to that reality, there will be no meaningful change in Zimbabwe. Until the people of Zimbabwe realizes that the opposition, whom they've entrusted the task of implementing reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections, are no longer interested in carrying out that task. They only pretend to do so just to con people to believe that there will be change when they know that there's not going to be any meaningful change. This is the task that the people of Zimbabwe have got now to resolve. You can't keep participating in flawed electoral processes that serve to give big benefits to dictators, said Tendai Biti in 2015, sorry. And yet, he and his colleagues have been participating in these flawed elections. And we can ask them, what have you been smoking? What have you been drinking? But the simple answer to that we already know. Zanu PF bribed them with trappings of high office, and they forgot about the reforms. Chamisa has even gone one step further. He has been lying, blatantly lying about plugging vote rigging loopholes, just to con people to participate. Because even he himself, day after the election, was the first one to admit that Zanu PF had rigged the elections that he himself had been claiming he had plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes. We can ask, what have you been smoking? What have you been drinking? But we already know the answer. And Zanu PF has now become so powerful. Mnangagwa is looting the nation's resources at an alarming rate, making him so powerful that it is no exaggeration to say that he has got the police, the army, the judiciary, and all other key players in the Zimbabwe society in his deep pockets, including the opposition. It's for us, the ordinary people, to realize that the opposition we sent out in 1999, on the understanding that they are the movement for democratic change, has long changed its allegiance. Instead of fighting to ensure that all Zimbabweans have a meaningful say in the governance of the country, elections are free, fair, and credible, Tendai Biti and company have been in the business of convincing the people of Zimbabwe that they don't need democratic reforms. They don't need free and fair elections because they, MDC-C, have devised ways of winning rigged elections. And we, the people, have been foolish enough to believe these idiotic lies. Think about it. Have a good day.